Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at some tournament coverage where I played a local unsanctioned event called the Mardi Gras Classic. It was 2 rounds being played at the Hobbit course, which is a course I have featured on the channel very recently. And essentially, it was a course that had been around my area for a very long time, but then was essentially ruined due to construction. But now that the construction had kind of started to finish up, we put in a lot of effort over the last several weeks to kind of reinstall this course with a slightly new layout. And this tournament was kind of the incentive to really do that cleanup process. It was kind of a goal to aim towards, to say, hey, let's get this course up and running so we can throw this tournament. And the tournament kind of gave us a deadline, basically, to work towards over the last few weeks. And so this is that tournament, and I'll be showing you footage from it here from my perspective. I was playing in MA2 for this tournament, and I'll say right off the bat that it was quite cold for the first round. I think it was in the high 40s Fahrenheit, and it was very windy, and it was very windy all day for both rounds. The second round, it got a little bit warmer, got kind of in the mid to high 50s, but anyway, just to give you an idea on the conditions and all that jazz. But without further ado, let's get started. We started on hole 13. And this is like a 315-foot hole. Usually I come up very short on this hole. And so it was kind of interesting to see what happens here, because we did have a pretty substantial tailwind. It was also right to left cross. So I was trying to throw something understable and have it fight back with the right to left wind, but I wound up ripping that one way too hard. I actually wound up going out of bounds. I threw it across this ditch. I probably threw the disc about 380. So super out of bounds, as that ditch behind the basket there was the OB line. So I wound up taking a bogey on the first hole. Here's next hole, 14, a long par 4. I was pretty happy with the drive off the tee. I think I had about maybe 265, 270 left at the pin. And I just threw that way too low and didn't put it outside enough, so came up pretty short of where I needed to be. And this wound up being a very scary putt to run due to the hill behind the basket and due to how windy it was. So I kind of gave it a half bid when I'm taking the par. Big uphill hole here. Again, it was a right to left wind, so I was trying to, play something understable and have the right to left wind push it back left, but I never really exposed the flight plate to the wind in that situation. I just burnt it over, so had a tricky approach. Wound up making it happen. And this is just like a little bit of a view of the downtown skyline from the top of the hill. Now we're on hole 16, kind of a 300-foot downhill hole. Just wound up putting this one a little bit too outside. And so I left myself a rather long putt. And tried to float it in there, but it was a headwind, so I was trying to be pretty careful with it and wound up just taking a par there. And as you can see there, unfortunately, here on hole 18, I just slipped on the drive, so it wound up being pretty rough. Definitely very muddy conditions for the tournament due to a lot of rain that we had the days leading up to it. And here I wound up juicing the approach shot, which was kind of a constant theme this tournament, actually. For some reason, I just kept overshooting my targets on my upshots. And then as you can see, putting was also a pretty big issue this tournament for me. And as now we're at hole number 1. Kind of 280 right in front of you, but a low ceiling up the center, so I tried to go wide left with the forehand. And I just cut it in a little too early. Once again, I overshot the target with the upshot a little bit there, but still had a reasonable par putt in front of me here. And just missed low, which has been kind of a consistent issue for me in tournaments. Just not committing. Here's another situation where I kind of slipped on a muddy tee surface because it's natural tees and kind of just yanked it because of it, but still left myself an upshot to get up to the basket. Threw a pretty good upshot there. Left myself with a tricky putt, though, due to this interesting green that we have on this hole. but wound up getting the birdie, as that was a par 4. So now on the very next hole, hole 3. Yeah, and that time I definitely just had a little bit of an outburst, which I'm pretty embarrassed about. I mean, everyone's dealing with the same conditions, but the mud got the better of me there, made me slip. I was throwing the forehand, so I'm not messing up my drive. Now, I don't really throw the best upshot. And once again, just, I don't know what I'm doing on the putting green right now. It's been a real struggle where I feel like I'm putting really well at home, but as soon as I get out to an actual tournament, my putting is rough. That's pretty much what I was trying to do. This is a little bit out of my distance range. I was trying just to make sure I threw a good shot to set up for a par. I actually tried to give it the long jump putt bid for birdie. Missed it, and then I wound up missing low yet again. So, struggling again on the putting green. Now, here's hole 5. It was kind of a temp hole 5, though, and just couldn't have nailed that any better. Now left with a very interesting approach. Caught a tree on the way in, but it wasn't honestly the biggest deal. And so I was able to finally make a putt. Grab myself a par on that one. This is another temp hole for the tournament due to all this construction stuff you can kind of see in the background of this hole. It's about 350. Threw a decent drive, but it was a headwind, so it was certainly cutting the distance I got. Why not just kind of jump putting and approach up there to safely get my par on that one. Now we're on another long par 4 here on hole 7. Again, I was throwing into a headwind. Kind of getting elevated all around by it, but wound up staying safe, which was good. Kind of just barely catching this approach shot, but kind of just swung one out wide to line up to get a par approach, which I did just fine right there. So I went up par in that hole. Here's hole 8. Basket kind of just up here, very uphill. This one didn't wind up fading as much as I thought it would, so I actually kind of got in a little bit of trouble. But the disc did kind of filter down, so I still actually had a chance to approach the basket for my par. And I was able to do that, so not bad. Here we are a couple of holes later. I think this is hole 10, I believe. Again, had a pretty ripping headwind, so I wasn't really able to get much distance on this hole. This is about 340 or so. Wind up just kind of jump putting up there. Wind up being able to get the par, as you can see here. Didn't have much of a putt left after the approach. This is a big dog leg left here on hole 11, and it's really hard to get it forward enough and left enough at the same time. And this one I threw pretty low. A couple of good skips, though, put me in position to at least approach the basket for par. And I kind of left that one a little short, but it still wasn't too bad. Still was only about maybe 10 or 15 feet from the basket. Almost missed that one, though. That was a close call. And so this is the last hole here as we started on hole 13. This is hole 12. Again, we had a pretty bad headwind, so I was kind of scared of throwing the forehand. So I tried to just turn one over, but I burnt that one over real bad. And well short of the basket on this right-hand side. Again, that creek to the right of the basket comes into play a lot with the headwind, so I was kind of trying to be careful. And so that wraps up the first round. I think I wound up shooting 4 over par, which essentially put me, I think, 5 or 6 strokes behind the leader. And I was essentially within like 1 stroke, though, of top 3. I think we had 10 or 12 players in MA2 for this tournament. And so I was sitting in like a tie for 5th or something like that, but I was only 1 or 2 strokes away from 3rd. And really just the kind of the constant issue was, I was really struggling on the putting green. Particularly, I was missing low, which is not usually my miss. Like when I practice putting, my miss is usually either high or I'm pulling it right. But in tournaments, I always seem to miss low. And it always feels like it's because I'm getting in my own head and not committing to the putt and whatever the case may be. And it's just been a constant struggle because I feel like I do practice putting a lot. I mean, I putt every day in my backyard, basically. And so it's really discouraging that I can't get the putt to work in a tournament situation. Even when I try to have a set routine and everything, it just hasn't been coming together for me lately in tournaments. So hopefully I can just kind of keep grinding it out practice-wise. Another big thing is just my mental game has kind of started to deteriorate again. I feel like it's something I worked on a lot before I got my first win last year, where I got my first ace and all that jazz. I was like really working on my mental game a lot, like reading sports psychology books and things of that nature, and I felt like I had gotten to a pretty good place. But now that my putt's kind of been failing me in tournaments lately and I've been struggling a bit with my form, I feel like I've kind of started that downward spiral of losing confidence and getting negative. And so I'm trying to, work on bringing myself back up. But this tournament, it was definitely tough to do that when I was dealing with, like, frustrating conditions, very windy, very cold, muddy natural tees that caused me to slip on certain throws and just kept missing putts. I felt like I couldn't make a putt. Like, I couldn't buy one if it was for sale. Like, it was kind of rough. So that was kind of what was going through my head throughout the tournament. But I was throwing off the tee pretty well outside of, like, a couple of little mishaps, but just couldn't really connect on the putting green. Had a couple of approaches I was just throwing a little too hard. And, yeah, that was essentially the story of the first round. So, second round, we actually wound up starting on the exact same hole. Again, we had the same exact tail right to left wind. So, again, I'm trying to play something out wide right to have the right to left wind carry it back towards the basket. But, obviously, last time I juiced it and wound up going deep of the basket out of bounds, which is something that never happened to me when I was playing this course casually. Like, I think I played this course maybe 5 or 6 times since we finished cleanup before this tournament, and I think I was always short by like 30 feet on this hole. And so for me to blow past the basket by like 50 feet the first round kind of took me off guard, so I decided to adjust by throwing something a little bit more stable this round so I wouldn't burn it over right too much. But I wound up yanking it right again, but luckily this disc was more overstable and the wind caught it and brought it back. But then I was left with like a pretty crazy windy putt, so I wound up just laying up and taking the par. Threw kind of a similar throw on this hole to the first round. I think I landed in almost the exact same spot and was left with pretty much the exact same approach shot. And this one I actually got the distance right and got it in the air, but I put it out a little too wide. So I left myself basically a death putt with the creek behind the basket. And it was one of those situations, again, where with the wind, I kind of floated it up there in case the wind picked it up. But if not, it was a safe layup for par. This was the same exact situation as the first round, actually. I had a right to left crosswind, so I thought I could play something understable and have the right to left wind bring it back to the left. But again, the way I threw it, the wind never could get under the disc, so it just kept burning over to the right. And so this is my approach shot, which I leave myself kind of a death putt for par now. But I was able to get it done. And so starting off the round a little bit better this time. Lots of pars. And that one I kind of had another slipping issue, so I wound up throwing the disc really nose up because of that. And then this is, again, just me juicing my approach shots, which was kind of a constant theme. Something I need to definitely work on my touch a little bit. And then, yeah, the putting just wasn't there. So this was a par 4, or this is a par 3, actually, excuse me. And, yeah, just putting was a problem. So here's the next hole, hole 17. I think I parred it the first round. This round I have a chance for birdie. And again, I just threw a really low putt. This is hole 18. I just decided to try to throw something really stable. Stay away from the OB road that's to the right-hand side. And once again, I basically did the exact same thing I did the first round and just juiced my approach shot and left myself really deep at the pin. So I actually wound up just laying up and taking the bogey. Then this one, it just got battered down by a tailwind. So I didn't get any distance on that at all. Just threw it low and tailwind knocked it down even more. Finally threw a nice approach shot, though. And left myself with a pretty easy tap in for par on this hole. So that was good. So now we're on the next hole, hole 2, that par 4 that I birdied the first round. And once again, slipped in the mud, and this time I pulled it all the way out of bounds across this road. So this is where I took it, my meter back inbounds. And I just shorted my approach shot to try to save par. So this is basically just leaving myself with a very long jump putt to try to save par. And so on up, I think, bogeying or double bogeying that hole. Back to hole 4 here. Similar situation to the first round. Gave that a decent chance, and this time I didn't blow it by the basket, so I had a much easier par safe putt here. So a little bit of an improvement from the first round on this hole. This is that 10th hole yet again. This time I did not hit the green box, so progress was once again made, I guess, in this round. And here is a chance for birdie. And once again, just no putting ability in a tournament. Again, we were dealing with a pretty bad headwind on this hole, and I knew I wasn't going to birdie anyway, so I just played something safe to the left, set up the approach shot so I can make sure I get my par. So basically, according to the game plan, and basically park the approach shot, so easy par on that one. That was the 10th hole 6. Now we're on hole 7, that par 4 again. Once again, fighting a headwind, so just trying to play something overstable that stays away from that creek on the right-hand side. Didn't catch my approach shot on film, but it basically put me nearly pin high. So a very similar situation on this hole to the first round, and didn't throw the best approach shot there, though, so it kind of left myself a little bit of a tester to save the par. But was finally able to nail one. So now we're back over to hole 8. The big uphill hole. I was actually having trouble seeing this time around. The sun was like right in my eyes. Threw something more stable this time to make sure I didn't get caught up on that stuff on the right-hand side of the hill. I know we can't really see it here, but it winds up being a really good throw, as you can see. It actually gave me like a 25-foot birdie putt. And just low once again. So here's hole 9. I threw a forehand the first round, messed it up. This time I burnt this one over early. Left myself a very tricky approach shot to the basket. Not a foot fault, by the way. I had to put my disc in front of my mini, in case people were going to put that in the comments. And it's unsanctioned, so anyway. This is my par save putt. And whiffed it again. As I said, putting was a problem this day. Throw this into a headwind again. And I actually want to point something out that I'm also struggling with a little bit with my backhand. Let me see if I can show you. I'm still planting my foot like a little open sometimes. It's not as bad on this clip, but it's definitely something I've been struggling with. I'm just like planning with my hips kind of opening up early. I have been trying to focus more on like pushing my left shoulder back instead of actively reaching back with my right arm to try to help with my timing and power and just overall form. But it's still just not quite lining up yet, so I'm still kind of stuck on that distance plateau of about 325, 340 feet. Thought I could safely run a jumper here. And it put me in a situation where I was well deep at the basket and had all these trees to contend with, and I'm trying to putt around. Kind of hard to tell from this camera angle, but I'm trying to like weave a putt around some branches, and again, the putting game just wasn't there. This is that big dog leg left again. I kind of throw a similar shot to the first round, just kind of a low, skippy shot, and leave myself a similar situation. This time I tried to give it a little bit of a jump putt bid. Easy par. Here's the final hole of the tournament. I tried to just brush off a horrible shot by fake hyping myself up, I guess. I don't know. Trying to be at least a little bit more positive as I threw a pretty good approach shot here. After throwing a lot of up shots deep, it was nice to finally throw one correctly. And so I finished the tournament with a par, and I believe I shot 4 or 5 over again in this second round. And so I wound up finishing, I think, somewhere in 5th to 6th place out of the 10 to 12 people that were in my division. And so it was definitely far below where I wanted to be, but it was one of those things where, yes, it was very windy and very cold, and so it certainly wasn't ideal tournament conditions, and it certainly made putting a lot more difficult. It made throwing distance shots a lot more difficult if you were thrown into the headwind, and so and with the muddy tee surfaces, there was definitely a few tee shots I feel like, I don't want to say weren't my fault, but things I couldn't really account for, just like slipping so badly while I'm trying to throw a tee shot and yanking one, which, in the second round, it caused me to go out of bounds on the second hole and caused me to take like a double bogey or something like that. So those were like little things that I couldn't really control, and I kind of had to just let go. It's obviously frustrating in a tournament situation when you have those things happen and it's taking away from your score, but it is what it is. There's nothing you can do about it. So basically, throughout this tournament, the main things I am seeing is I'm struggling with my mental game again. I need to get back to having that, goldfish memory, positive attitude that I was able to really hone in on when I won my tournament last year. And I feel like somewhere along the way, once I started running into adversity again and wasn't seeing the success anymore, I started to kind of have that downward spiral back into a negative attitude. And so I need to really readjust that, rehone that, and kind of get back to staying positive, staying focused, and just, letting the bad shots go, focusing on the next one. And that's something that I really am just battling with back and forth. And I think we all battle that at some point. Like sometimes your mental game feels really good. You feel, super good, super fresh, super positive, but then you'll start getting frustrated and you start getting negative, and then you have to kind of fight back to being positive. And I mean, there is the ebbs and flows of the mental game that I think everyone experiences, even at the toppest level. And it's just a point right now where I'm kind of in a rut, and I need to like really get that mental game sorted out. And I think that'll help everything afterwards. Secondly, I just got to figure out putting in tournaments, man. Like obviously this tournament, a little different due to the conditions, making putting harder than it normally would be. But at the same time, I definitely left a lot of putts out there that I should have been making to at least save par. And I was just, most of my misses were very short, but I did just have a couple of air balls that were wide right. And it just stinks because, again, I do putt in my backyard every day. And I feel like I've built like a pretty consistent pre-putt routine that I try to follow every time I putt. And putting feels good when I'm at home, and even when I play casual rounds with friends, I usually putt pretty well, but it just never fails when it comes to tournament day. I just can't get that to translate. I wind up just really struggling on the putting green, and it's just super frustrating because it's like I don't know what to do to fix it. It's like one of those things where I practice putting a lot. I try to keep that pre-putt routine to kind of follow, to kind of make sure that I'm not like letting the pressure get to me. I just kind of keep doing the same thing, keep following that pattern to kind of just stay locked in, and it's just not clicking for me right now. So not really sure what to do other than just to keep practicing putting, keep getting more tournament experience, keep grinding, and hopefully I'll eventually hit that breakthrough where I'm able to kind of get my mental game right on the putting green and make things happen. And it's just, still needing to work on my backhand form. That's the only thing that's going to really help me get more distance, is by just really getting that timing right particularly with my lower body and my plant foot and like my hip timing. Those are things that are just going to take reps, more practice, field work, network, things of that nature to try to really get that form dialed in so I can try to increase that distance. I will say I'm definitely a lot more accurate nowadays compared to where I was like a year ago. So, I mean, I see that progress. But, yeah, I just feel like I'm still stuck on that same distance plateau, unfortunately. So, a lot of takeaways from this tournament, though, for me mostly was just the mental game stuff, just trying to focus back in on, staying positive and, trying to just move on, accept the results, and not get too down on myself. And just, really try to polish my putting even more. So putting even more practice putting time in the backyard. I have another tournament coming up very soon, so I don't really have a whole lot of time to fix things, but this was a fun event, that's for sure, and definitely this course, it's nice to have back in the area, and it was cool to get to play an event on it. And anyway, hope you folks enjoyed this video and also enjoyed my commentary and kind of diving into my thoughts throughout the event and my thoughts after the event and all that jazz. And sorry that you didn't hear much audio from the course and stuff. That was mostly because it was super windy and I'm recording with my iPhone. And if I would have had the course audio higher, I think it would have just been annoying hearing basically wind blowing the whole time. So I kind of toned it down. But anyway, that's going to do it for this video. Hope that you will subscribe and follow up and all that jazz. Comment down below if you're kind of going through the same struggles as me, or if you have any tips or anything like that, that'd be helpful. Appreciate that. And yeah, look out for more content coming soon. See you.